When my own son told me I was a burden and sent me to a nursing home, I never imagined how my life and his would change forever. This is the story of how I turned that pain into my greatest strength. Please, before we start this story, support us by liking this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where you're watching from. Eleanor Hayes had lived in the little blue house on Oak Ridge Lane for over 4 decades. Every creak in the floorboards and squeak of the old screen door carried memories of birthdays, holidays, and bedtime stories. She raised her only child, Brandon, in that house after her husband passed when Brandon was just 10. She worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, and poured her heart into being both mother and father. So when Brandon pulled up one sunny Saturday morning in his polished black SUV and said he was taking her out for a surprise, Eleanor smiled. She thought maybe he was taking her to see the botanical gardens or to get lunch at Miller's Cafe. She even grabbed her cardigan, the one he gave her last Christmas. The ride was quiet. Brandon kept glancing at his phone while Eleanor admired the changing fall leaves. About 20 minutes in, she noticed they weren't heading toward town. Instead, they pulled up in front of a large brick building with gold lettering that read, Golden Oaks Senior Residence. Her heart sank. "Brandon?" she asked, gripping her purse. He parked, turned to her, and exhaled like this conversation was long overdue. "Mom, this is a good place. They have full-time staff, medical help, everything you need." Eleanor frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I can't keep checking in every day, taking off work," he said, voice cold. "You forget things and the stairs aren't safe for you anymore. You need more care than I can give." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You're leaving me here?" Brandon avoided her eyes. "It's best for everyone. I've already signed the papers. They're expecting you." Eleanor's fingers trembled around the strap of her handbag. "But this is my home. You moved into my house last year. You said it was just temporary." He sighed. "We're making it work. The kids need space. Look, they have a nice room ready for you here. It's not a punishment, it's help." Then came the words that cut deeper than any knife. "Mom, you've become a burden." A burden. The woman who gave up her dreams for him, who worked evenings at the school library and weekends at a diner just so he'd have a better life. Eleanor sat still, blinking back the sting of tears as a nurse approached with a clipboard. Brandon gave her a stiff kiss on the cheek and handed over her suitcase. "They'll take good care of you." And with that, he was gone. Eleanor stood in the lobby, the walls echoing with silence. She felt more alone than she had in her entire life. Eleanor followed the nurse down a long hallway that smelled of antiseptic and lemon polish. The walls were painted a bland beige, broken only by generic paintings of sunflowers and mountain lakes. At the end of the corridor, the nurse paused outside a door with a brass number, 217. "Here we are, Ms. Hayes," she said cheerfully, unlocking it. "We've set up a cozy little space for you. Meals are served 3 times a day, and there's bingo night on Thursdays." Cozy wasn't the word Eleanor would have used. The room had a narrow twin bed with thin sheets, a dresser, a single window that overlooked the parking lot, and a chair that looked like it belonged in a dentist's office. There was no warmth, no soul, no sign of her life. The nurse set her suitcase on the bed and smiled. "If you need anything, just press the call button. We're happy to help." Eleanor nodded, barely hearing her. Once the door clicked shut, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Her hands trembled as she opened her suitcase and found only the basics: some clothes, her pill organizer, and a framed photo of Brandon as a boy. Nothing more. He hadn't even brought her knitting needles. The days that followed moved slowly. The other residents were polite but distant. Most kept to themselves. Some seemed lost in their own memories. Eleanor went to the dining hall when she had to, sat through a group art class once, and spent most of her time sitting by the window, watching cars come and go. Brandon didn't call. 2 weeks later, he visited, not to check on her, but to drop off papers. "Just some legal stuff," he said, handing her a folder with power of attorney forms and housing documents. "It'll make things smoother for everyone." Eleanor hesitated. "This is about the house, isn't it?" Brandon shrugged. "We're remodeling. The kids need their own rooms. and your old bedroom's perfect for a nursery." She looked at him, searching his face for the boy she once knew. But all she saw was a man in a hurry, impatient, detached. Against her better judgment, she signed the papers. What choice did she have? He already had the keys. That night, Eleanor lay awake in the stiff bed, staring at the ceiling. She had spent a lifetime giving, sacrificing, loving. And now she had been reduced to a file in a drawer and a signature on a deed. The next morning, during her routine walk through the small garden behind the facility, she overheard two nurses talking. "There's a community fundraiser next month," one of them said. "The local news is covering it. Great exposure." Something in Eleanor clicked. Exposure. She might not have much left, but she had a voice, and she was done being invisible. If her son thought she was a burden, maybe it was time to give him a real one. Eleanor sat in the community room the next day, a mug of lukewarm coffee in one hand and a notepad in the other. Her cursive handwriting, once neat and elegant, was shakier now, but still determined. She started making a list, not of possessions or regrets, but of people. People she had helped, people she had loved, people who remembered her for something more than just being Brandon's mother. She listed former students from the library reading program, neighbors she'd babysat for, a teacher she'd brought casseroles to when her husband had cancer, a local girl she once mentored who went on to become a city council member. Names she hadn't thought of in years, but whose lives she had touched. It was time to see if they remembered. During one of her supervised outings into town, an afternoon pass for a dental appointment, Eleanor asked the van driver to stop by the Willow Creek Public Library, her old stomping grounds. There she was greeted by Olivia Bennett, the new head librarian. Olivia was in her mid-30s now, confident and sharp, but when she saw Eleanor, her eyes lit up. "Mrs. Hayes," she gasped, "you used to help me with book reports when I was a kid. I still remember how you used to bring peanut butter cookies to Saturday story time." Eleanor smiled. "I'm afraid I'm not baking much these days, but I could use a bit of help." They sat in a quiet corner, where Eleanor explained everything. How Brandon had moved into her home under the pretense of helping, only to place her in a facility and take over her property. Olivia's eyes narrowed. "That's despicable, and probably not even legal." "Do you know a good attorney?" Eleanor asked. "I know a great one," Olivia said. "My cousin, Rachel, handles elder law, and I'll help you with more than that." Olivia posted Eleanor's story, carefully anonymized, on a community forum. What happens when family forgets their own? The responses were overwhelming. Dozens of former students and neighbors chimed in, offering support, legal contacts, even invitations to come stay with them. The town hadn't forgotten Eleanor Hayes. They just didn't know where she'd gone. Rachel, the attorney, visited the nursing home personally. She reviewed the power of attorney forms Brandon had brought. "He pressured you to sign this without full understanding or independent counsel," Rachel said firmly. "We can challenge it, and I think we should." For the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt like she was standing on solid ground again. Later that evening, a young reporter named Jordan Davis from the Willow Creek Gazette stopped by Golden Oaks. He'd seen the forum post and wanted to do a story for his Second Chances column. Eleanor looked him square in the eye and nodded. "I have something to say, and I think it's about time I said it." She wasn't just taking her life back. She was taking back her name. By the time the Willow Creek Gazette ran Eleanor's story, it had already gone viral on the town's online message boards. But when the newspaper published the article with a photo of Eleanor, stoic, proud, and seated by her small nursing home window, it ignited something bigger. The headline read, "She raised a son alone. He took her house and left her here." It didn't take long for local TV stations to pick it up. Within 48 hours, a national morning show had reached out to schedule an interview via Zoom. Eleanor couldn't believe it. "You're becoming something of a local celebrity," Olivia teased when she visited that week with homemade cookies. "I didn't ask for fame," Eleanor replied, adjusting the collar of her blouse. "Just fairness." Attorney Rachel was already working behind the scenes, filing a legal petition to revoke Brandon's power of attorney and freeze the transfer of Eleanor's assets. Rachel also brought in a financial advisor to assess what Brandon had done since gaining control, and the results weren't pretty. Brandon had taken out a second mortgage on Eleanor's home. He'd cashed out some of her savings accounts and even attempted to sell her antique jewelry collection online, all while telling his friends that his mom was happy and taken care of. When he got wind of the article and the growing backlash, Brandon finally showed up at Golden Oaks, unannounced and visibly angry. "I can't believe you aired our family business in public," he hissed, walking into her room like he still had control. Eleanor looked up from her knitting and raised a calm eyebrow. "You made my life public the moment you put me in here, like an old coat you didn't want to hang on your fancy walls." Brandon scowled. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look?" "Yes," she said simply. "I do." The door opened and Rachel stepped in, holding a court order. "Mr. Hayes, per this temporary injunction, you're no longer authorized to make decisions on behalf of your mother. Also, you're being investigated for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult." Brandon's jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me? She's confused. She signed everything." Eleanor stood, slowly but with grace. "I may be older, but I'm not confused. I know what love is, and what betrayal looks like." He stormed out, muttering under his breath. Rachel turned to Eleanor and said, "That went better than expected." Eleanor exhaled, one chapter down. That night, her interview aired on national TV. People across the country watched as she told her story, not with bitterness, but with quiet strength. "I didn't fight for myself sooner," she said, "because I didn't think I mattered anymore. But I do. We all do." Her phone rang off the hook the next morning. Messages of support poured in. Old friends, distant relatives, and even strangers from out of state offered to help. Eleanor smiled. She had once been a burden in her son's eyes. Now she was a beacon in everyone else's. Brandon hadn't expected the backlash to hit so hard. The same friends who used to admire his rational decision to move his mother into care now avoided his calls. His boss at the real estate firm pulled him into the office. "Bad optics, Brandon," he said, sliding a copy of the Willow Creek Gazette across the desk. "Our clients read the news. They don't want to work with someone who dumps his mom in a nursing home and takes her house." Brandon tried to laugh it off. "It's not what it looks like. She was sick, forgetful. I was doing what was best for everyone." But the words felt hollow, even to him. Meanwhile, back at Golden Oaks, Eleanor's room began to change. Cards and letters covered her windowsill. Flowers arrived daily. A retired woodworker from town even dropped off a handcrafted rocking chair with a note that said, "For all the stories you once told, sit and keep telling them." Olivia stopped by nearly every day now, helping Eleanor set up a small blog called The Porch Chair Chronicles. Eleanor wrote about aging, dignity, and finding your voice again. Her first post, "I raised a son, but I had to raise myself again at 76, was shared over 20,000 times. One afternoon, a teenage girl knocked on her door. She was quiet at first, fidgeting with the straps of her backpack. "Hi, Mrs. Hayes? I'm Sadie," she said. "You used to run story time at the library when my mom was little. She said you taught her it was okay to be different. That saved her life once." Eleanor's eyes welled up. "She asked me to give you this," Sadie added, holding out a keychain with the words, "You mattered then. You matter now." Back at Brandon's house, things were falling apart. His wife, Leanne, who had quietly gone along with his decisions, began to speak up. "You said she was losing it," Leanne said one night. "But everything I read and watched, she's more lucid than you." Brandon rubbed his temples. "Are you seriously turning on me now?" Leanne crossed her arms. "I'm asking what kind of man steals from his own mother and calls it helping." He said nothing. Then came the call from Rachel. "We filed a motion to restore Eleanor's autonomy and seek damages for misused funds. You'll need to appear in court next week." Brandon was stunned. "She's really doing this to me?" "No," Rachel replied. "She's doing this for herself." The court date approached quickly, and the pressure mounted. At Golden Oaks, Eleanor sat with Rachel and Olivia, going over everything one more time. "You're about to hold him accountable," Rachel said. "Are you ready?" Eleanor looked down at her hands, no longer trembling, and gave a slow nod. He made me feel like a burden, she said. So I'm giving him a real one now, called consequence. She folded the papers and smiled faintly. For the first time in a long while, I feel free. The courthouse in Willow Creek was small but packed on the morning of the hearing. Local reporters waited by the steps, their cameras focused on the double doors. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had turned quiet injustice into national headlines. Eleanor walked in slowly but confidently, dressed in a powder blue suit she hadn't worn in years. Olivia pushed her wheelchair until they reached the front row, where Rachel was already seated, notes and files in hand. Brandon arrived moments later, wearing a sleek suit and forced confidence. His face was tight, and his eyes avoided his mother's. Leanne trailed behind him, distant and quiet. The judge, a stern but fair woman named Judge Caroline Mendez, opened the session. Today's hearing concerns the guardianship and financial control of Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, a senior citizen who was removed from her home by her son, Mr. Brandon Hayes, under power of attorney. Rachel stood. Your Honor, we contend that the power of attorney was obtained under pressure, with no legal counsel present, and was used not for care, but for control. My client was not ill. She was inconvenient, the courtroom murmured. Brandon's lawyer, a smug man named Griffiths, responded with legal jargon. The son acted in what he believed to be her best interest. She signed everything willingly. Eleanor raised her hand. Judge Mendez gestured for her to speak. I may be old, Eleanor said, standing with Olivia's help, but I remember that day clearly. Brandon told me I was slipping, that I could hurt myself if I stayed home. I trusted him. He's my son. But he wanted my house more than he wanted my health. Her voice didn't shake. I wasn't confused. I was cornered. Rachel followed with bank records showing how Brandon had drained Eleanor's savings within 3 months and listed her home for sale. But the most damning moment came when a nurse from Golden Oaks testified. She was brought here under the claim of memory decline. I did her intake, the nurse said. She passed every cognitive test. She cried the first night, not because she didn't understand, but because she did. Brandon finally stood. This is crazy. She was lonely. I tried to help. I paid her bills. I visited. She's making me out to be a villain. Judge Mendez leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, in your words, your mother was a burden. Is that correct? Brandon froze. I may have said that once. I was overwhelmed. I didn't mean... You said it in a text, Rachel interrupted, handing over the printed message. To your friend. My mom's basically dead weight. I got her into a home, and now I've got the house. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Eleanor looked down, not in shame, but in sorrow. When the judge called a recess, Olivia leaned over and whispered, You've already won, Eleanor. No matter what happens. Eleanor nodded softly. I just needed the world to see who I really was, and who he really became. The courthouse in Willow Creek was small, but packed on the morning of the hearing. Local reporters waited by the steps, their cameras focused on the double doors. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had turned quiet injustice into national headlines. Eleanor walked in slowly but confidently, dressed in a powder blue suit she hadn't worn in years. Olivia pushed her wheelchair until they reached the front row, where Rachel was already seated, notes and files in hand. Brandon arrived moments later, wearing a sleek suit and forced confidence. His face was tight, and his eyes avoided his mother's. Leanne trailed behind him, distant and quiet. The judge, a stern but fair woman named Judge Caroline Mendez, opened the session. Today's hearing concerns the guardianship and financial control of Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, a senior citizen who was removed from her home by her son, Mr. Brandon Hayes, under power of attorney. Rachel stood. Your Honor, we contend that the power of attorney was obtained under pressure, with no legal counsel present, and was used not for care, but for control. My client was not ill. She was inconvenient, the courtroom murmured. Brandon's lawyer, a smug man named Griffiths, responded with legal jargon. The son acted in what he believed to be her best interest. She signed everything willingly. Eleanor raised her hand. Judge Mendez gestured for her to speak. I may be old, Eleanor said, standing with Olivia's help, but I remember that day clearly. Brandon told me I was slipping, that I could hurt myself if I stayed home. I trusted him. He's my son. But he wanted my house more than he wanted my health. Her voice didn't shake. I wasn't confused. I was cornered. Rachel followed with bank records, showing how Brandon had drained Eleanor's savings within 3 months and listed her home for sale. But the most damning moment came when a nurse from Golden Oaks testified. She was brought here under the claim of memory decline. I did her intake, the nurse said. She passed every cognitive test. She cried the first night, not because she didn't understand, but because she did. Brandon finally stood. This is crazy. She was lonely. I tried to help. I paid her bills. I visited. She's making me out to be a villain. Judge Mendez leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, in your words, your mother was a burden? Is that correct? Brandon froze. I may have said that once. I was overwhelmed. I didn't mean... You said it in a text, Rachel interrupted, handing over the printed message. To your friend. My mom's basically dead weight. I got her into a home, and now I've got the house. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Eleanor looked down, not in shame, but in sorrow. When the judge called a recess, Olivia leaned over and whispered, You've already won, Eleanor. No matter what happens. Eleanor nodded softly. I just needed the world to see who I really was and who he really became. The courtroom reconvened after the recess, the air thick with anticipation. Judge Mendez cleared her throat, scanning the gathered faces. After reviewing the evidence and testimonies, this court finds that Mr. Brandon Hayes abused his power of attorney and financially exploited Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. Effective immediately, all financial control is restored to Mrs. Hayes. A wave of relief washed over Eleanor. Tears she hadn't expected welled up, but this time they were tears of triumph. Judge Mendez continued, Furthermore, Mr. Hayes is ordered to reimburse Mrs. Hayes for all misused funds and barred from making any decisions on her behalf. This court will also review additional protections to ensure her safety and dignity going forward. Brandon sat frozen, a shadow of defeat crossing his face. Leanne looked away, her silence louder than any words. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of supporters waited, including Olivia, Rachel, and the many community members who had followed Eleanor's story. As Eleanor emerged, she was greeted by cheers and applause. A local news crew approached with a microphone. Mrs. Hayes, what do you say to those who doubted you? She smiled, steady and proud. I say, never let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. We all deserve respect, love, and a chance to live with dignity. This isn't just my victory, it's for anyone who's been forgotten or pushed aside. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor moved into a cozy apartment near the library. Olivia helped her set up regular community talks where Eleanor shared her story and wisdom. Sadie, the teenager who had visited her at Golden Oaks, helped design a small garden outside her new home. A place for stories and healing, Eleanor called it. Brandon tried to reach out once, but Eleanor didn't respond. She had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or allowing harm to continue. Instead, she focused on building new relationships, ones rooted in kindness and mutual respect. One afternoon, while sitting on her porch with a book, Eleanor received a package, a letter from a distant cousin she never knew she had, offering a place to stay during the coldest months. Another friend called, inviting her to a weekly knitting circle. Eleanor's life had changed in ways she never imagined. The son who once called her a burden no longer had power over her story. She had reclaimed her life, not just for herself, but for all the forgotten mothers, fathers, and elders. And in doing so, Eleanor Hayes found peace. Eleanor's story reminds us all of the importance of dignity, respect, and standing up for ourselves, no matter our age or circumstances. Even when life feels unfair, courage and truth can lead to new beginnings and healing. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others to raise awareness about elder abuse and the power of resilience. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Your support helps bring more stories of hope and justice to light.